Hi guys, I am Siddharth. Today I am going to share my views on differences that are asked in software testing interviews. This topic is very important and useful for people in software testing niche, whether you are a fresher or experienced. So let's get started with the topics. Here are the topics that are there in front of us, that is functional testing versus non-functional testing, retesting, regression testing, front-end testing, back-end testing, smoke testing, sanity testing, static testing, dynamic testing, verification and validation. So the first topic for today is functional testing and non-functional testing. Functional testing basically checks product features. Non-functional testing basically checks product properties. Testing of functional requirements, which defines a system or its components, are there in functional testing, whereas non-functional requirements are covered in non-functional testing, which defines quality attribute of a software system. Functions basically covers main inputs, behavior and outputs. Quality attribute of a software system are covered in non-functional terms. Set of standards used to judge the specific operation of a system comes under non-functional testing. Functional testing captures use cases, whereas non-functional testing captures quality attribute. Functional testing focuses on user requirements, whereas non-functional testing focuses on user expectation. It is easy to capture bugs in functional testing. It is not easy to capture bugs in non-functional testing. Types of functional testing are system testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, API testing. Types of testing in non-functional testing are performance testing, stress testing, usability testing, security testing. So coming on to the next, that is retesting and regression testing. Regression testing and retesting are the form of testing which can be confusing. So here in front of us are certain point which will be useful for us, that is performed for failed test cases is retesting. It checks the final execution whether it is passed or the defects has been fixed. In regression testing, conformance of recent code changes has not adversely affected the existing functionality is done. It is done for past test cases. Also done for failed test cases, but retesting is only done for failed test cases. Defect verification is a part of retesting, whereas defect verification is not a part of regression testing. Automation should not be done for retesting. Automation can be done for regression testing or should be done for regression testing. Sometimes human gets lethargic, so to have machine or the automated software for regression testing is better for the better results. So retesting is a form of planned testing and regression testing is a form of generic testing. Retesting checks the original fault that has been corrected, whereas regression testing focuses on unexpected side effects. Retesting executes a defect with same data and the same environment with different inputs with a new build, whereas regression testing is done to check modification or changes which are mandatory for the build in an existing project. So suppose there is a new build that has come, so you have to perform regression testing. So if that has to go for production environment, so regression testing will be done to check whether the unexpected things have not come with software system. So coming on to front end and back end testing. Front end testing checks functionality of application, whereas back end testing checks data loss, data corruption, deadlock. Front end testing needs knowledge of basic requirements, that are the requirements which are there in business, and it can be automated, whereas backend testing needs knowledge of SQL and database concepts. No information of data space storage is required in front end testing. Information of database storage is required in backend testing. Presentation layer of 3-tier architecture comes in front end testing, whereas backend testing is performed on database logic and business logic. Types of testing that are there in front-end testing are unit testing, acceptance testing, accessibility testing, regression testing. Backend testing covers database testing, API testing. Front-end testing is mainly done on GUI, that is graphical user interface. Elements of web application front-end testing would involve checking functionalities associated with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. GUI is not checked in backend testing. You need URI, that is Uniform Resource Identifier, or URL, that is Uniform Resource Locator, which can directly be passed using a browser with parameters using for the function to get response in some default format. For example, XML or JSON. JSON is a form of you can say a payload which is passed in API to check whether the data is coming is right or not. So coming on to smoke testing and sanity testing. Smoke testing checks critical functionalities of the program, whereas sanity testing checks the new functionality or bugs that has been fixed or not. So smoke testing and sanity testing sometimes might be confusing for certain testers or developers. So here are the clear and key points which will be useful for you. So it is performed by developers and testing team, that is smoke testing, and the testing that is only performed by testers, that is the testing team, is sanity testing. Smoke testing is scripted or documented. Sanity testing is neither scripted nor documented. Considers as the subset of acceptance testing is smoke testing. Sanity testing is considered as a subset of regression testing. Testing is performed from end to end in smoke testing. Testing is performed on certain components or modules of the entire system is done in sanity testing. Verification to check stability of the system in order to proceed with more rigorous testing is in smoke testing. Verification to check rationality of the system in order to proceed with more rigorous testing is sanity testing. Smoke testing is similar to general health checkup. Sanity testing is similar to specialized health checkup. Coming on to the next topic, that is static testing and dynamic testing. In static testing, you do not need execute the code. You just need code in front of you. Whereas in dynamic testing, you need code execution as well all the things which are there. So you can say it is a form of static test verification. Static testing and verification can be same terms, and validation and dynamic testing can be same terms. Static testing is performed in early stage of development to avoid errors or the things that are there in before compilation comes under static testing. Whereas you need to compile the code or it is done after static testing, that is dynamic testing. Testing of software for checklist and process to be followed are covered in static testing. Testing of the software for input values and output values are there in dynamic testing. Static testing covers structural and statement coverage, that is the white box testing techniques, whereas dynamic testing covers boundary value analysis and equivalence partition. These are the key forms of black box testing. These are covered in dynamic testing. Cost of finding bugs is less, but the ROI is high. It is involved in the early stage. Static testing is done in early stages, so ROI is high. Whereas dynamic testing ROI is low and cost of finding bugs and fixing bugs is high because it is performed in development stages. So static testing is basically for the assessment of code and documentation, whereas dynamic testing is done to find bugs, bottlenecks in the software system. Coming on to verification and validation. Verification focuses on documents, design, code, and program. Validation focuses on mechanism of testing, validating the actual product. Main methods that are there in verification are walkthroughs, reviews, inspection, test checking. Whereas validation covers black box testing, white box testing, and non-functional testing. In verification, you do not need to execute the code, whereas execution of code is required in validation. Verification is a low level exercise and it catches error which do not catch or cannot be catched in validation, whereas validation is a high level exercise, whereas certain bugs which cannot be captured in verification are captured in validation. Assurance of product service system to meet need of customer and stakeholders is done in verification. Evaluation whether a product or a system, not a product but you can say with a regulation or the requirements are covered in validation. So it is very easy point, that is the last point in front of us. Verification is done before validation, whereas validation is done after verification. So thank you so much uh, to for watching this video. Thank you guys. Keep learning. Happy learning.